Thank you. Now, Stefan's right. So this is exciting for me because this is actually the third time I've had a chance to come and do an Authors at Google talk. So I want to thank all of you for inviting me back a third time. Today, what I want to talk to you about is a new book that I wrote. It just came out a couple of months ago. And it's very exciting because I just got a note from Amazon the other day that said that they've just voted this as one of the top 20 business books of the year, which is very exciting. The book is called Show and Tell. Yes, is that awesome? The book is called Show and Tell, How Everybody Can Make Extraordinary Presentations. And this is a very meta kind of a talk because you're going to see that I'm making a presentation about making presentations. And so I just thought the best way to start is to give you a story about presentations, or a story about public speaking. And in this story, we're going to have 4 characters. So the first character is this guy right here. You may recognize his face. Not many people do, but you might recognize his name. This is Michael Bay. Now, Michael Bay, of course, is Hollywood's loudest director. This is the guy who created all of the Transformer movies and Pearl Harbor, and it's generally acknowledged as the best director of explosions ever. So Michael Bay, here we have this super experienced entertainment professional, and the story I wanted to share about him was late last year, he was supposed to give a presentation at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. He was supposed to go on stage and give a talk about a Samsung product. And I don't know how many of you may have seen this, but it is a disaster. It's horrible to watch. What happens? Michael Bay goes on stage, and within about 15 seconds, the teleprompter breaks, and he can't continue. He just totally freaks out on stage, panics, stumbles around, and it's horrible. It's just cringe-inducing to watch this on YouTube, and finally says, "I'm sorry," and leaves the stage after about 20 seconds. It's terrible. So that's Michael Bay. So character number 2 in our story about public speaking is this guy, John Travolta. Clearly also a very experienced entertainment professional. Did anybody watch the Academy Awards last year? So John Travolta is supposed to introduce Idina Menzel, who's going to go up and sing Let It Go. And John Travolta, of all people, who's had a life in entertaining, gets on stage and totally mumbles the name, forgets what he's supposed to say, and says, "And now I'm going to introduce the amazing megastar Adele Dazeem." Who the hell is Adele Dazeem? This person doesn't exist. Okay, and character number 3 is the real Adele, who we all know. So real Adele, incredible entertainer, of course, won 6 Grammy Awards a year and a half ago. So, but here's the question. Has anybody heard anything from Adele in the last year and a half? The most amazing breakout artist of 2 years ago is gone. Where is Adele? Well, she has gone on record. It's interesting because there's different rumors. She's working on a new album. No, she's not. It's all denied by her agents. Adele has decided to take a 5-year hiatus off of performing because she said that the act of going on stage is too stressful for her. Performing is too stressful. Wow, this is interesting. And now here's a 4th guy. Doesn't really belong with the rest of these. Anyone know who this is? This is Warren Buffett, probably best known as the 2nd wealthiest man on earth. And Warren, interesting, not an entertainment professional, not a great entertainer by any stretch. But Warren is different from the rest of these people because Warren Buffett, when he was a kid, this is in his biography, decided early on that he wanted to be a business guy. And he realized that in order to be successful in business, he was going to have to get over his greatest fear. And his greatest fear was public speaking. He was terrorized. He hated doing it. But Warren knew that if he was going to be successful, he was going to have to be able to figure out a way to communicate his ideas to other people. So he approached public speaking as a science. And he said, how do I go about doing this well? How do I get over my worries and my anxieties? Took a lot of training, did a lot of practice. And here's the thing that he understood that the others do not. These are all these entertainment professionals can't handle it when they get on stage live. And here we have Mr. Business Geek, who's the only one who can. Because he understood something, presenting is as much science as it is art, and above all, it takes practice. These other folks all mess up because they say, "Oh, I'm cool, I'm charismatic, I'll just go up on stage and I'll wing it." That is a guarantee for failure when we're going to present. So let's talk a little bit, why does this matter to us? Because I know at Google that it's important for you, even though your day job may involve code or design or technology or security. I also know that it is expected at some point that each one of you is going to have to explain to other people what you do. We all have to get up on stage at some point. In fact, I have become convinced that there is nothing that is more important for our professional success, and in many cases our personal success, than being able to get up in front of other people and share our ideas. But here are, okay, Google folks, here are the data. In the most recent study, 74% of Americans would rather die than give a speech. Wow, that's kind of bad. That's like that's a global epidemic. 3/4 of all people would rather die. We're less afraid of dying than we are of getting up on stage. So I want to let you in on a little secret. It's actually fun to present if we follow a couple of very, very simple rules. The fear is real. We'll talk about it a little bit later on. It's real, but it's there for a good reason. The fear becomes a problem when it gets so big that it gets too crazy for us. But all the fear is there is to tell us, you're going to do something stressful, you got to perform. If what we can do is take that fear and say, hey, fear, I've seen you before. I know where you're coming from. I know your job to me is just to make sure that I do a good job. We let the fear come in and go right back out, and we use the energy of it passing through to help us do a good job. And so what I want to share with you is that when we give a presentation, it could be anything. It could be something that we're just sharing with our team, or it could be a big formal presentation with a cast of thousands. It doesn't matter. The basic idea is always the same, and it's kind of like we are going on a trip. And here we are. This is us down here. And here is our idea, the thing that we want to share in our presentation. And usually what happens is we take that thing and we show it to people. We say, this is my thing, this is my idea, and here it is. And usually what happens is it's not a very exciting engagement. It usually lies kind of flat like this, and there we are sort of showing our thing, and some people are falling asleep, and some people are checking their Android, and some people are totally checked out. Well, you know what? I don't think we should do that anymore. In fact, I think if there's ever an opportunity for us to give a presentation about anything that has the likelihood of just lying flat, we shouldn't give it. We should forget all about it. Because from now on, I think it's really critical that we make every presentation we give, no matter how low-key or seemingly unimportant, we want to bend that line up and make every single presentation we give extraordinary. If it's not, why are we giving it at all? And what's the difference between that flat line and that extraordinary line? It's a very, very simple thing. What is the difference between this and this? A presentation that is extraordinary, it's very simple. It's one that changes people. And the change doesn't need to be enormous. It can be a very small change, or it could be really, really huge. But what we want to understand is that a presentation's amazing, both for the audience and for us presenting it, when at some point during that 20 minutes, 40 minutes, 2 hours, whatever it is, somebody has a little bit of a change. And that's what we want to aim for. And in order to make that happen, it's really simple. There are only 3 rules, 3 really basic rules for making an extraordinary presentation. And here they are. Rule number 1, tell the truth. Wow. If we lead with the truth, the hearts of the people we're talking with will follow. Rule number 2, tell that truth with a story. If we lead with a story, understanding will follow. And rule number 3, tell that story with pictures. Because if we lead with the eye, the mind will follow. Tell the truth, tell it with a story, and tell that story with pictures. And if we do that, every presentation is going to be pretty amazing. Today, we're going to go through all 3 rules, and I want to start, weirdly, with rule number 3. I want to start with the rule that says we tell our story with pictures. Because I want to share with you initially some pictures, and we are actually going to take a little test. It's a very simple test. I don't want anyone to stress out. There's no passing or failing in this test. All that's going to happen is I am going to show you 30 random images. And I know they're random because all I did was go on Google Images and download the first 30 images that I saw. They're just 30 random images. I'm going to show them to you. We're going to look at them. The thing is, I don't want you to try to memorize them or maybe write down what they are. You won't have time. I just want you to look at them because we're going to go through each one. I'm going to give you about a quarter of a second. We're just going to go through really, really fast looking at these images. So, is everybody ready to look at some pictures? All right, up at the screen, we take a breath, and here we go. Okay. Can anybody tell us all 30 of those pictures in order? What did we just look at? Well, of course we can't. All right, so I want to forget about that for a moment. Remember, there were 3 rules. I want to go to rule number 1. Let's talk about rule number 1 for a little while. Let's talk about this idea of telling the truth. And my intention here is not to go all Boy Scout on you and say, oh, it's all about telling the truth. Here's the truth. A presentation looks like it's about information sharing. That's what we think a presentation is about, and that is partially true. But in order for information to be shared, something else has to happen first. What a presentation is really about is about trust. It is about me trying to get you to trust me, and me trying to get me to be trustworthy to you, and me trusting you back. The real idea is this. In order for there to be any information exchange, if you don't trust me, if you think I'm not very trustworthy, nothing good is going to happen. Here's kind of an interesting part about this truth aspect. There is no faster way to establish trust between ourselves than for me to tell you the truth. We all have a kind of a sixth sense. We know when someone is BSing us. So the converse of this rule is also true, that says this: there is no faster way to lose our audience than to BS them. We can do it for a little while, but after a little bit longer, people start to say, I don't think this is really right. Now, okay, that's all fine. Tell the truth. But the tricky thing is, there is more than one truth. There are 3 truths. They all exist all the time. One of those truths is the truth of the data. This is what the facts tell us. These are the things that we can measure. These are the pieces of information that we can collect. These are the facts, and there is truth in them. They are true. There's a second truth, though, isn't there? Which is the truth of what do I think about all of those facts? The truth that's in my head. And then there's a third truth, which is the truth that's in my heart. What do I really believe about all of these things? And what's interesting, of course, is that very often these 3 truths are not in alignment. They are not the same. I know we all have something that we believe, we know it in our heart to be true, that the data do not support, or perhaps for which there are no data. What's interesting about this, though, is that these truths are all true all of the time. They all exist all of the time. And I want to give you a little example right here about these truths. So, what do we have here? I have a glass of water. Now, I can give you some facts about this glass of water, and thank you, Stefan, for providing this excellent prop. I can tell you that there are about 4 cubic inches of H2O in this glass, and I can tell you that there are 4 cubic inches of oxygen and hydrogen in this glass. And those are the facts. That's great data. I can also say, what do I think about that? Well, I know that metaphorically, a half-full, half-empty glass is a sign of something. I know that many people think that a half-full glass is a sign of optimism, but a half-empty glass is a sign of pessimism. So those are the things that I think about, those numbers. And then there's what I believe. I believe that this glass is half full. And nothing anybody ever says to me is going to change that. Those 3 truths are all real and they all exist. And guess what's interesting about those 3 truths is that they are not always the same. The way we perceive those truths is very, very different. I like to represent it as this kind of a pyramid. We have endless amounts of factual truths. I mean, you're Google, for goodness sake. You collect more data truths than anybody. We have more facts. The thing about those data truths, though, those fact truths, is that they're very easy to change. All that needs to happen is I need to get a new data point. Today, this might be a fact, and tomorrow, that might be a new fact. And that's fine. It's very easy to change the truth of fact. The next truth that sits on top of that, that's a little bit harder to change, is not the data itself, but what do I think about it? What do I actually think is the way the world is? Very difficult to change. I mean, if I think things are something, it's going to take me a long time to change the way I think. But the one that sits on the top, the most difficult one of all to change, is the truth of the heart, the truths, the things that I believe. I don't care about the damn data. I know this to be true. To change someone's beliefs is extraordinarily difficult. But that is the truth that really lasts. That is the change that really matters. Point here, when we want to change someone, ourselves and our audience, through giving a presentation, we want to keep in mind that we've got these three things that we're going to be working through. How do we present these in a way that makes sense to someone so that the level of change takes place? Well, that brings us to rule number 2, which was telling a story. Why do we tell stories? Stories are the expression of something we're going to call a storyline. Why are stories important? Well, because everything in the world is complicated. Anything life is complicated. Problems are complicated. The truth is very complicated. And when something is complicated, when something is complex, it's almost impossible for us to figure out a way to digest it. We don't want to. We just reject it. So what a storyline does is it takes that complexity and it forces it into a line to make that complexity tolerable enough for us to touch into it and try to experience it long enough to try to make some sense out of it. That's what a story does. It takes that complexity and forces it into a line long enough for it begin to make sense to us. That's all a story does. Which tells us that any story, any presentation that's based on a story, any presentation is going to be built on a storyline, and that storyline is always clear. There is a beginning, there is an end, and there is something that happens in between the two of them. The storyline is not endless, the storyline is not confusing, and the storyline is not random. Whenever we're going to present anything, it doesn't matter whether it's a truth of fact. It doesn't matter if it's a truth of the head, or it doesn't matter if it's a truth of the heart. When we're going to present anything, we have to present it in the form of a story, because that's the only way understanding is going to come out of it. Because stories do two things. Certainly, they move us along from a beginning to an ending. They have to do that. Come with me as I tell you about public speaking or something. But they have to do a second thing as well. It's not enough, as we know, for the story to just lie there. The story also has to move us up. It has to change what we know or what we understand or one of those truths. Otherwise, the story has been ineffective. We talk about storylines. There are only 4. There are only four storylines in the whole world. Anytime we give a presentation, it is going to be based on one of these 4 storylines. There are no more. There are only these 4. And what I want to do is map them out. How many people in here have a piece of paper and a pen? Actually have a piece of paper and a pen? Because here's an interesting aspect also about making a presentation. On a side note, I've already been talking for about 15 minutes. And at this point, no matter how charismatic I am, no matter how compelling my story is, the human brain's going to begin to check out. It doesn't matter. I could be singing and dancing. It's just going to happen. So one of the things that's advisable at about this point in a presentation is give the audience something to do, and give them something to do that parallels what you're presenting about. Is often a really nice sort of a little magic trick to re-engage the brain again. So what we're going to do is, rather than me telling you there are 4 storylines and here they are, we are going to make them together. So the way that we're going to do this is I'd like you to take your sheet of paper. I'm going to fake it with this. I'll use a horizontal Post-it note. All right, I want you to imagine that this is your sheet of paper and hold it horizontally like this. And what I want you to do is fold it in half. Stefan, you're not folding your paper. All right, did everybody do that? Anybody need any help? Okay, now what I want you to do is we're going to fold one more time. I want you to fold it down into quarters like that. All right? And now comes the big reveal. I want you to open it up and admire this lovely handiwork that you've done. You've just created a perfect 4-quadrant little chart. And now we're going to draw, for those of you who have a pen, the rest of you will have to use your fingernail. We're going to draw. And what we're going to draw, one in each quadrant, are the 4 storylines. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to write some words. So what I'd like you to do in quadrant number 1 right here is I'd like you to write report. In quadrant number 2, I'd like you to write explanation. Explanation. In quadrant number 3, I'd like you to write pitch. And in quadrant number 4, I'd like you to write drama. These are the names of the 4 storylines that define everything. Let's look at what they actually look like, though, because we know every storyline, again, it starts at a point and it moves along and takes us somewhere else. So the report looks like this. I'd like you to draw a little dot. We start here and then draw a flat line and make it look a little bit like an EEG. Just little bursts of information come along, but for the most part, that report just lies flat. That's what a report does. I'm giving you some facts, here's a fact. I'm giving you some more facts, here's a fact. I'm giving you another fact, and then we're done. Thank you, goodbye. All right? An explanation is a little bit different. It starts down here, and I give you some information, and then we take a step up together. And then we move along, and we take another step, and we take another step, and we take another step, until we're at the end. Now, what's different about this than the report is we can see that rather than just a line of facts, what we're actually doing is building something. Each fact or each idea builds on the previous one, so that by the time we're done, we've had a change from this level of understanding up to this new level of understanding. We've got to now have a new ability. We know something new. The pitch. We start here, and we've got a bit of a problem, and that problem looks kind of like a big old nasty mountain or a hurdle in front of us. And so what we're going to do is we are going to jump over, we're going to throw ourselves over that hurdle, and we're going to come down on the other side. And what we will find is that if we've done it well, we had to jump pretty high, but we've still, even at the end after we've come down, we're still at a higher position than we were to start. That's a pitch. And the last one is the big one. This is called the drama, where we start here, and everything is just going along fine, and then all of a sudden the stuff hits the fan. And life starts to get bad, and things get really bad. And then they get worse and worse and worse until we're down here in this pit of despair. It's all over. But no, we find a way to come back. We start to work our way back up. We figure out how to do it. We save ourselves, and we come back with so much power that we actually burst way past our starting line with this entirely new lesson that we've learned because we had to struggle. Every story, every presentation we're ever going to give is going to be based on one of those 4 storylines. Now, how would we pick which storyline would be the best one for us to use for our presentation? Well, there they are again. We might want to think about, are we delivering information? If just information is enough, then perhaps a report's enough. Do we want to deliver ability? Do we want to help people have a new ability? We will use the explanation. Do we want to help people get across a hurdle? Solve a problem in a new way? Then we'd want to do a pitch. And do we want to have people go through some suffering so that on the other side they can increase their level of happiness with us? Then we're going to want to give the drama. A little bit earlier I said any extraordinary presentation changes people. Well, there are only 4 ways that people change. We change our information. We know these things. Perhaps tomorrow we're going to know these new things. Okay? We've changed our information. We can change our knowledge. What do we know? We may think this today, and tomorrow perhaps we'll know some new thing. We've changed our knowledge. We may change our action. Perhaps today we're just standing still, and tomorrow we will be running very, very fast. So we can change our action, or the big one, of course, again, is we can change our beliefs. Perhaps today we are cat people, and maybe tomorrow we are going to be dog people. Ooh, wouldn't that be a change? Those are the 4 ways that people change. There's really not a whole lot more than that. So here's the cool thing about those 4 storylines. This is kind of the magic. If we know what kind of a change we would like our audience to experience through our presentation, we know which storyline to use. It's as simple as that. If we know what kind of change we would like to have take place during the presentation, we know what storyline to use. Like this. If I simply want to change your information, I want to give you new facts, I'm going to give you a report. If I want to change your knowledge and your ability, if you can do this today, but we want you to be able to do that tomorrow, I'm going to give you an explanation. If I want you to change your actions, we are moving this way today, but we need to move that way, I am going to give you a pitch. If we are going to change our beliefs, we believe this to be true, but I want you to believe that to be true. The only way I can do that is by giving you a drama. If I know which change I want to have the audience experience, I know which storyline I want to pick. Today I want to focus on just one of these storylines. It's the drama, because this is really the big one. This is the one, because this changes beliefs. This is the one that has the most power ever. And so I wanted to spend time on this one. Yes, I'm guessing that most of the time when at Google you need to give a presentation, you will be needing to give reports because you have a bunch of facts you need to deliver. I would encourage all of you to never give a report again. I don't care what your lead is asking for. Never give them a report. Nobody ever got a raise. Nobody ever got a promotion for giving a really great report. What you will want to do is use one of the other storylines, and you will couch the facts within that. But that is the storyline that people are going to find compelling. So in a way, I would like to encourage you from now on, anytime you need to give a report, to maybe start to think about some of the elements that take place in the storyline we're going to explore now, the drama. If there was a patron saint of presenters, it would be this guy, Joseph Campbell. Now, I know many of you know who Joseph Campbell is. Is there anybody in here who is familiar with Joseph Campbell? Has anybody heard of Joseph Campbell? So Joseph Campbell was a historian, and he started working in the late 1920s, and he worked all the way up through, I believe, the early 1980s. And what Joseph Campbell did is he traveled the world. He was fascinated by the great myths of all of the great cultures through all of history around the world. And what he did is he went out and he traveled around, and he learned to speak 7 different languages. He traveled all over the world, and he would get to know the great myths from each one of the cultures. And what was really fascinating is he started to realize that there were a lot of common threads that existed between all of these great myths in all of these different languages from all of these different cultures around the world. And one of the things that Joseph Campbell did is he wrote a book called The Hero of a Thousand Faces. And what it was it's a big, thick tome. It's his summary of the commonality that he found between all of these great world myths. And one of the pieces that was in that book is something that became known as the hero's journey. And when Joseph Campbell introduced this back in the 1950s, it didn't really go anywhere. Nobody but a few academics thought this was particularly interesting. But since that time, for reasons we will explore, this has become a really, really common thread for how do we come up with an interesting story. This is Joseph Campbell's own drawing. He drew a little circle to describe the hero's journey. And he drew the circle moving in this direction, moving counterclockwise, and it goes like this. We start at point X, at which a hero, who's usually just a common person, crosses from the regular world, which is above this line, into a strange supernatural world, which is everything below the line. In that supernatural strange world, at point Y, that hero encounters fabulous forces, and the hero has to fight an incredible battle to vanquish the foe, to destroy those forces in that very strange world. And then, having learned the lessons of having fought that battle, the hero then, at point Z, comes back into the regular world, but now a very changed person. Because of the heroic acts, because of the battles that that person had to fight in the strange world, when they come back to the regular world, they now have this extra amazing knowledge that allows that person to share new insights with people in the regular world. Now, That was the way that he described it. I think there's a simpler way that we all know this same idea. It says this: whatever doesn't kill us makes us stronger. This is really the central message of the whole hero's journey. Now, the hero's journey has become kind of something that's entered into pop psychology, and it's getting kind of beaten to death and all of that. But a lot of people say, no, there's no such thing as a hero's journey. Well, let's check and see if Joseph Campbell might have been right. And the way I thought that it would make sense to check to see if this story, this drama, actually has power for us is to look at what's popular, to look at the 3 most successful movie franchises in history around the world. If there's any way to say, is there something that resonates for people in general about this story? Well, let's see if this story carries through the 3 most successful popular stories pretty much of all time. So we're going to look at 3 of them. One which takes place in the past, a mythical past, which will be, of course, The Lord of the Rings. One of these stories takes place in a mythical present, which is Harry Potter. And one of these stories which takes place in a mythical future, which is Star Wars. And yes, I know it begins by saying a long time ago, but let's face it, I mean, it's interstellar travel and it's spaceships. It's the future. So, yes. So, well, you bring up an excellent point. Let's see if this plays out. So let's look at these 3 stories and see if they all tell something that looks like the same story and some kind of a story that might adhere to this hero's journey. So all of these stories involve the hero, who is always this unassuming guy who is cast into a new world against his own desire. He just wants to continue living this happy life, but something gets in front of him and forces him to go into a new world. And the story that this hero is going to experience is that he's going to save the world. And in the case of Frodo, he's going to start here in the Happy Shire, and then things are going to get really bad, and then he's going to pop out on the other side. In the case of Harry, he's going to start out in the regular world, and things are going to get really bad, and then he's going to pop out on the other side. And in the case of Luke, he's going to start out in this plain planet that nobody cares about, and things are going to get really bad, and he's going to pop out on the other side. Interesting, they're all telling the same story, and they're all telling it in almost exactly the same way. But one of the things that's also interesting about this hero's journey is that the hero is not alone. There are other characters that are helping on this journey. And what's amazing is those other characters always play the same role. What do I mean? There is always the sidekick. The goofy character who's there to sort of enable the hero in amazing ways. It's a kind soul who stays with the hero through thick and thin. So it's Sam with Frodo, and it's Ron with Harry, and it's Han Solo with Luke. And then as we're getting near the end, they have a fight, and the sidekick leaves. But the sidekick always comes back at the very last moment, and is the one who enables the hero to finally win, who does the amazing thing at the end. Whether it's Sam carrying Frodo in throwing the ring in there, or whether it's Ron saving Harry in the last battle, or whether it's Han Solo flying in with the Millennium Falcon at the last second when Luke's flying down the Death Trench and blows up the Darth Vader ship. So there's that character. But are there more parallels? Yes, because there's always has to be the mentor, who obviously it pays to be someone with a big beard. So in the case of The Lord of the Rings, we have Gandalf, who comes along, and we've got Dumbledore in Harry Potter, and we've got Obi-Wan in Star Wars. And it's interesting because remember what happens in the hero's journey. The hero is in a strange world, a place where they don't know what's going on. The job of the mentor is to guide them and give them rules of how the world works in this strange place. So this ancient wizard who knows the world provides these clues and provides information for how to live in this strange world, and then dies, leaving the hero alone. But always, again, comes back to the hero in spiritual form at the last possible moment, just before the final climax, and gives them the last bit of support that they're going to need to have it. And then there is the princess, because we'll notice that so far it's just been a bunch of dudes. So where are the women in this hero's journey? Well, in the classic hero's journey, as it is represented by Joseph Campbell, and clearly by these 3 most popular movie franchises in history, the woman's role is kind of interesting and kind of weird, because there's always this woman who is a princess, And she has some knowledge. She kind of has the keys to what it's really going to take to win this thing. Whether it's the princess of the elves or the princess of the muggles or the princess of the universe. And she's always a potential love interest. And always turns out to be the hero's sister. For those of you that are interested in, is there an aspect of the hero's journey that might be more interesting or appealing from the woman's perspective? Joseph Campbell didn't write anything about it. But there are a lot of people now. In fact, there's a woman whose name is slipping my mind right now. I met her recently at Stanford, who's looking to see, is there a parallel hero's journey that might apply from the woman's perspective? The theory being as follows. These stories, these great myths that have stayed with us, tended to be the stories that stayed with us because they were the stories that got retold. So perhaps what was happening is it was the guys who were retelling the stories, so their stories continued to get told. The stories that the women were retelling were never getting retold. But is there a woman's hero's journey? And there are people looking into it, and it appears that there may be. And it's not exactly the same as the one we're going through now. But let's look at this one. So are there any other characters that are the same? And as I was doing this, I was having fun taking these stories I know and getting my little Lego characters and lining them up and saying, well, are they all the same? And it's amazing because as you continue through, yes, there's always this gentle giant. So whether it's Gimli or Hagrid or Chewbacca, again, it pays to have a really, really big beard and to be really hairy. And the idea is you're always a giant, which means that initially this person is very, very scary. But then the hero realizes that really the giant just represents someone with an enormous heart, someone with enormous belief, who never wavers in their belief and continues to provide the hero with guidance back to what do you really believe in your heart. And then there's always the comic duo. There are always these bumbling twins, and they're always twins, who are screwing everything up along the way. They're comic relief, but they're there for a reason. Because whether it's Merry and Pippin or Fred and George or R2-D2 and C-3PO stumbling along telling these jokes, giving us comic relief, in the end, they always find in themselves some aspect of the heroic journey that the hero experienced as well. And they always, these bumbling fools, surprise themselves at the end by what they are able to accomplish in spite of their own goofiness. Now, there would be no story if there were no bad guy. So there has to be a bad guy. And obviously it pays if you're a bad guy, you wear a black cape. That's how people know that you're the bad guy, whether you're Sauron or whether you're Voldemort or whether you're Vader. And also, you are not human. You do not have a human face. You are always masked, or you're so horribly disfigured that you don't look like a human anymore. And that's how we know that you are the villain. And you are the person that the hero must defeat. But the bad guy, the villain, is not there on their own because they always have an army. And this is an army that is always there in countless number, unbeatable number, and again, is always masked and always inhuman, whether it's the orcs or whether it's the mentors or whether it's the stormtroopers. And when we first meet this army, we know that they are unbeatable because there are so many of them and they are inhuman. But then an amazing thing happens. The moment that you kill the boss, the entire army, poof, just disappears. They all just drop dead right there, all million of them. And it turns out that that army had no strength other than what came to them from their leader. The moment you get rid of the leader, the army's completely gone and the battle is over. So why do I take this time to share this with you? Because people poo-poo the hero's journey, but oh no, it is absolutely right. It's almost as if this is something that is in us. This is what a story, this is what a drama is really about. And again, if you just look at movies, you look at pop culture, almost all of the big movies just tell the same story over and over again. We change the characters, we change the time. Recently, we changed the gender, but we're always telling the same story of this person who doesn't want to be in the strange world, who goes in, changes, and comes back out. All right, so that's kind of cool, but what about in real life? I mean, does anything about this ever take place in the kind of the world that we're in? Absolutely. Let's think about this for a moment. Do we ever see anything that happens like this at work? So this is, again, our line of the full hero's journey story. This is really our view of the whole drama. And what happens is we start today where everything's fine. Some bad trigger happens. We go into this point of descent. We reach this pit of doom where everything is over. And this is, by the way, is known as death. There is nothing that's worse than this. Life is over, but then we decide, no, we're not going to die today. We figure out, or we remember, or we find something that tells us how to begin to get out of this pit. And we begin to work our way back up. And as we work our way out of that pit, fighting dragons along the way, we start to get so much energy that, again, we learn a lesson and we come back on the other side having learned this entirely new thing. But does this ever really happen? Does it ever happen that there is someone who's having a fine life and then the life takes a turn for the worse? And then that someone becomes very sad because that life is really, really bad and is just about on the verge to give up. Has this ever happened? And then that person says, no, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to find something that's going to help me turn this around. I'm not going to die today. And then that person, just through the act of deciding to try to improve, finds that things get better and then it comes screaming out on the other side. This happens all of the time. And this happens in business all of the time. This is the way we tell stories about what we do, about business. Think about some of our great sort of business or pop culture heroes. One of the reasons that we love these stories is because they tell the same story again. Lady Gaga, disastrous childhood, drug addiction, homeless, saved by her grandmother and becomes Lady Gaga. We have Howard Schultz at Starbucks. So Howard Schultz is CEO of Starbucks, leaves Starbucks. Starbucks starts to stumble. This is about 4 or 5 years ago. You remember there was this day, Howard Schultz is reined back in, say, we need you, man. We need you back. You've got to be CEO. He steps back in. First thing he does, he looks over the whole thing. You remember this? 4 years ago, for one day, every Starbucks around the world was shut down. He said, forget it. You can't get your latte today. I'm closing them down. We're doing a global reset. It's as bad as you can get, and now we're coming back up on the other side. Or whether it's Richard Parsons who managed to weather and save Time Warner during this disastrous AOL merger and ended up becoming CEO of Time Warner because he was the one who was able to save. And then the best of all, back to Harry Potter, if there's anybody who has a legitimate right to write the hero's journey again, it's J.K. Rowling. Her story, single mother, on welfare, disastrous life, writing away this little book in the cafe in this little town in the UK, working on it day in and day out, and finally getting that book published and going on to become the most successful author of the last 3 decades. This is the story that we love. So what I would like to encourage you to think about, it might seem a bit abstract. You will be asked by the person who's responsible for your quarterly review to come in and give a report about what you've been doing. That would be lovely to give them just the facts. But wouldn't it be amazing if you could also deliver some of those facts in the form of a story that is this powerfully compelling? I guarantee if you do that, your mentor is going to look at you a little bit differently and perhaps give you maybe even a little bit more support on what you need to do. It's just a little bit of magic to think about for the next time you want to give a presentation on anything. Whether you're giving the report, whether you're giving the explanation, whether you're giving the pitch, if you can add in a little bit of the drama, it will be that much more extraordinary. Which brings us back to rule number 3. Tell the story with pictures. So 35 minutes ago, I shared with you 30 random pictures. I'm going to show you those pictures again now. Now I'm going to show you 2 pictures. I would like you to tell me, right or left, which is the one we saw before? Which one did we see before?
Right. Left. Right. Left. Right. Left. Right. Left. 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 Right. Left. Right. Right. Left. Left. Right. Left. 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 Right. Left. Right. Left. Left. Left.
That's why we use pictures, 100%. Our memories are stored as images. They are stored as pictures. It's very rare that our memories are stored as words. When we memorize words, what we tend to do is just remember the words, but not what they mean. images are the way that we really, really remember and convey our messages. So I encourage you to use pictures. So if we just do those things, truth and story and pictures, public speaking does not need to be hard at all. In fact, it can be a tremendous amount of fun. And if you like that, there's more in that book, Show and Tell. I encourage you to take a look. And if you like that, I have something online called the Napkin Academy, where a lot of the things that I talk about are available as videos, all stored in YouTube. So again, I want to thank you so much for your time, for letting me share a little bit about truth, story, and pictures. It's always my pleasure to talk at Google. Thank you so much.